Last week, we made a video here on the channel talking about 5 things that we want to see in FM25. We asked for you guys to comment down below your suggestions for the next game, and we got loads of comments, loads of great ideas. So today, we're going to run through some of them, see if they're good ideas, see if they're bad ideas, and get your thoughts on them too. That's right, it's the second part of our wishlist video. We promised there would be a part 2 when we did the first part last week. You guys came in with so many great suggestions, so we're going to go through them today. As you can see, we've got an article here on the FMSCOUT website with tons, and I mean tons of different suggestions from you guys that have been put both on the site and in the YouTube comments, and we'll go through all of that a little bit later in the video. We're not going to do every single one, mind you, but we'll cover some of the key ones, and I want you guys to keep the suggestions coming in the comments down below. Don't forget as well, if you do enjoy this video, to smash the like button for us and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, this article should be updated over time the more suggestions we get, but there's plenty on here, and whilst it doesn't mean any of these will come true, it's great just to check out the ideas. And it tends to be in recent years, Sports Interactive have listened to the community, not necessarily on every single thing, but obviously FM25, as it says in this article, is meant to be almost a new breed of football manager. FM24 was the last FM that we know it, as Sports Interactive said, and this is like a rebirth. So there's a good chance we are going to see a lot of new features in the new game, and the more suggestions we get out there, who knows, maybe Sports Interactive will hear it. But either way, as we already know, there's plenty of new things coming to the new game: women's football, upgrades to the graphics engine, and the game completely rebuilt on a new engine, which is Unity. But obviously that doesn't mean that that's everything us guys want to see. There's plenty of different suggestions, and we're going to go through some of them today. Now, these are in no particular order, but I did find a lot of the ones towards the top of this article are definitely the ones that we hear quite commonly. So let's start with the main one, the one that a lot of you did comment about in some fashion, and that is international management. The experience of that being upgraded. It's something a lot of us have been asking for quite a while in FM. Being an international manager, there isn't too much to it in game, it's kind of boring, and they could definitely add more features to it. My only issue whenever I talk about this is I don't quite know what people want to see. That's maybe because I haven't done too much international management myself, but I do imagine being an international manager in real life has a lot less responsibilities than a normal manager's job. Of course it does. I mean, obviously the games are vitally important to a nation, but you don't have to do a game every single week. You go to games, you watch it, and you scout your players, and then every few months you get to use those guys. So obviously it isn't as intensive being an international manager. So do let me know in the comments what kind of things are you wanting to see change to international management. I know it's something we've covered in a lot of these request videos and it's never quite been changed, but it is something that I could see Sports Interactive looking into. So there is a good chance we will see some kind of upgrade either in FM25 or down the line to international management. What is it that you guys want to see? Because I can't quite think of what would really make international management appealing to players. I think in terms of playing a football management game, international management is arguably one of the least enjoyable parts of the whole thing. Now, I'm going to rate all the ideas given, both in terms of whether it's realistic that we'll see it in game and also whether I think it's a good idea. For this one, I think we can rate this pretty highly on both sides. I think it's pretty realistic we will see some kind of improvement to international management, and also I think it's something that a lot of people will take benefit from. It might not be something that everyone wants to use, but it'd be much better if that international management is a better experience all round. The second thing that is noted on this list, and it does note none of these are in a particular order, is that the AI for Director of Football requires an improvement. It also mentions some other staff role like technical directors and loan managers, and I can definitely get behind this. I mean, I use quite a lot in my rebuilds that I do on my channel the Director of Football suggestions for players. If you don't know about that, you can go to the transfer section. If you've got a Director of Football, you can suggest a transfer target and make a request. Now, quite often, they seem to give you players that are just completely out of your price range and don't actually factor in your budget. Now, I can see sometimes when they give you 3 options that one tends to be a cheaper option, one tends to be more expensive, but really, you just want 3 options that you could actually afford or actually do something with. It's no good managing Notts County and then your Director of Football saying, oh, you know who'd be really good for us? Cole Palmer, that guy from Chelsea, like all of that stuff. Now, obviously that example is a bit extreme, but you do find they do give you some pretty poor targets. And the same for technical directors. If they're hiring staff, I find they tend to hire some decent staff members for you, but in terms of sometimes the contracts they can put out, I'm not necessarily sure I fully agree. Also, the amount of times where you ask your Director of Football to negotiate a contract for you because you can't be bothered to do it, and pretty much every time it comes back that the Director of Football can't do it and isn't isn't willing to negotiate on the terms that the player is asking for. Now, whether that's an issue on the player AI side in terms of always wanting to be an important player, no decent player ever seems to be able to accept being a squad player, even if you were going to offer them more money. So I think, yes, we could see an improvement to AI all around, to be honest. I thought it about opposition AI managers, how agents work. I covered some of that in my own wishlist video, just about the general AI behind transfers and agent requests, whatever it might be, contract negotiations. I use the example of when I tried to sign Sancho when he had 2 months left of his United contract and he didn't want to join me for less than 100 grand. 2 months later, he was let go as a free agent, which he knew he was going to anyway, and then he was suddenly willing to accept a 20 grand a week contract for me because he was now a free agent. But really, he should have known, or at least the game should have known, that he was going to be that and should have been willing to take a pay cut. But yeah, enough about all of that. The AI definitely needs to be improved behind some of the decision making. In terms of whether I think this is realistic, I think it is. I think there is a lot of changes to AI every year in Football Manager, so hopefully they continue improving it from the way that it is currently. And in terms of whether it will improve your game, I don't necessarily think you'll see it completely change the way the game works, but what would hopefully happen is you wouldn't notice the issues with it, so it would just work as you would expect, which you kind of want to see when you're paying money for a game. But let's move on to the next suggestion, because when I read through this list at a glance earlier, this is something that really caught my eye as something that I thought could really change the way Football Manager works and is quite realistic. And this is offer a more realistic way of playing the game, i.e. managers aren't always out there buying players, selling players. Often it's a director of football. Let's say Mauricio Pochettino at Chelsea wouldn't have been able to just say, I want Neymar, give me Neymar. He would go to the director of football, they'd come back with meetings, kind of how you have your transfer meetings in FM currently, and they'd give you the targets and you can maybe have a say, but you don't get to decide. Now that might be more realistic to real life, of course, but I think making transfers is one of, if not the best things about Football Manager that the majority of people enjoy. For some it's tactics, for a lot of people it's doing the transfers. And whilst this might be more realistic, I think it would take away from the enjoyment of the game if this was how the game worked. Now if there was maybe some clubs that have a specific model, maybe when you are doing an interview for Chelsea for example, maybe an interview for Real Madrid, whatever it might be, clubs that operate with this kind of style where they have a set way of playing, a set way of bringing players in, and you kind of just have to accept it as a manager, maybe that's something that is in the contract negotiation. When you go to sign for a club, you won't have a say in transfers, or you'll only have a partial say in transfers, and some clubs might say you can have full say in transfers. Now that might be interesting and might change the way that you go about taking jobs. Maybe you wouldn't want to take the Chelsea job, for example, if you knew you wouldn't have the influence on the transfers, but maybe they do say in the contract negotiations, if you can get Premier League title in 2 years, then you can have more of a say. Whatever it might be, that could be interesting, but whether it's something SI will do, I don't necessarily think they will, because I think it would take away a lot from the enjoyment of some saves if you aren't really able to have full control over the transfers in and out at your club. Before we move on to the next one though, do let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything that I'm saying so far. It'd be really good to hear your opinions. I don't know absolutely everything about the game or how you make a game. I'm not saying that the things I say wouldn't be realistic, can't be. I'm just saying these are my opinions, so I'd love to hear yours. But what I wanted to cover is this here. A stadium or grounds editor can make a lot of people happy, and this is obviously the case. A lot of people have asked for years to be able to customize your stadiums. I just don't see it being something that Sports Interactive do. I think it would be fun when you are expanding a stadium, but this being a Football Manager simulation game, and they keep leaning into that lane of saying that it is a football management simulation as much as it is a game. They add some gamey elements to it, but nothing that's too out of the ordinary that a manager would do. And designing a stadium isn't something a manager would do, and for that reason, I don't think we would see this. I'd love to see it. I don't think anyone would necessarily complain about it, but I just don't think it's the way Sports Interactive will go. But who knows, maybe they'll prove me wrong. Now, they were a lot of the main comments that we did get on the YouTube video, but I'm now just going to go through a few of these things very quickly on this list that I really want to talk about. And by the way, this whole list will be linked in the description if you want to check it out. And like I say, it will be updated. The first suggestion that I want to talk about is this, enhance a tutorial mode for newcomers. And I think this is something that needs to happen. You can obviously turn this off if you played the game before, but right now you kind of get the inductions. It's basically just text on a screen and it's really hard to follow. I think there should at least be a video or something for every single section of the game, or maybe even if you launch Football Manager for the first time, it says, do you want to do a tutorial, puts you as manager of Real Madrid for a week and explains to you how the game will work when you choose your club. I think this is something that needs to happen in FM. The amount of new players we're getting since the game has gone to PlayStation and Xbox Game Pass, lots of new players come into the game, and for a lot of people it is quite overwhelming, even though they are playing the, scaled down version of the game that goes on consoles. I think there needs to be a much better tutorial mode, and this isn't just a good suggestion, I think it's a given that needs to happen if they are going to build FM from the ground up. Now, the other one that I wanted to cover is this: lower the occurrence of overpowered new gens and give the older players a fighting chance. Basically what this is saying is when new gens come through in your save, there are too many of them that are world-class potential. I agree with this. Even if you have a small database, every year there'll be, say, 4 or 5 South American wonderkid strikers that will all at some point in your save go on to have 16 pace, 16 acceleration, 16 finishing, 16 dribbling, 16 passing, and become, 90 million pound strikers. These kind of guys don't come out of nowhere in world football. You probably get 1 or 2 being produced in every single age group that can eventually go on to be a world-class talent. Because there is such an abundance of wonderkids, within a few years, all of the wonderkids are better than all of the guys that started in your game. I think if they could just tone that down a bit, of course there is the element of not all of these players will reach their potential, but I just think if, say, there was 5 Ballon d'Or potential winners coming out every year, that would make it a lot more sustainable in your FM saves in terms of keeping those older players around for longer and keeping them more useful. Things like managing a U4B team I covered in my wishlist video, the same for new gen faces being photorealistic. I think this is something we will see in Football Manager 25, but the last thing I want to talk about that I just wanted to say thank you guys for your suggestions, because this never even appeared in my head as a potential thing. It just makes so much sense. Allowing facilities to be upgraded more than a single level, of course that's something that should happen. If you've got training facilities that save a level of 14 out of 20 in your save, you come into a load of money, and 3 years after you've got those training facilities you decide to make new ones, why would they just improve them slightly when if they've got all this money they could go all the way out if they wanted to, or at least give you the choice to say, let's just go for max facilities. Yes, it will cost more, but it will benefit our club in the long term. That should be a choice that we're allowed to make as a player, or at least maybe the board can ask you for your opinion on it, because again, in terms of building training facilities, that isn't something that maybe a manager would be asked about, but that's the case in FM anyway. You've always been able to ask for new facilities to be made. I just think, yeah, it makes perfect sense that you should be able to jump up a few more levels. But there you go, there's some of the things that you want to see in Football Manager. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them in the comments. Remember, the link to this article will be in the description, and as you can see, there's plenty more things on here that you can check out and look into to see whether you think they will be good ideas for FM25. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.